Hey everybody, how's it going? Just checking in for another live stream. I've got like a lot of work to do on this drawing, so I thought I'd take the opportunity while I had the time, thank goodness, to yeah, to just draw with you guys and girls and just hang out and answer some questions and things. A couple quick bits of housekeeping before I start up on the Q&A. Though I'll start drawing while I'm doing it. But and by the way, also please somebody in the audience let me know that the audio is working fine so that I don't have to worry about it. Just want to mention for those of you that are already subscribed to Patreon, fantastic, and you're going to be there and you're going to get the links to download my John Singer Sargent tutorial. So that's going to be April 1st. You're going to get that link in your Patreon messages, right? So not on email, but Patreon Messenger. That's where the links and the download info will be. Then also on the first, the other thing that's happening is that if you remember last month we did Drawing Essentials Part 3 as a live stream workshop. We're also going to be doing kind of the part 2 to part 3 and kind of finishing up that cast drawing. So that's going to be at 4 p.m. Oslo time on the 1st of April. We're going to like push through that drawing. It's going to be 3 hours of like solid drawing and talking and describing all the things that are going on. So really kind of intensive course there. And hopefully we get really close to the end of that drawing. The last thing I want to mention actually is, especially for patrons, but also if you're not signed up to Patreon and you're thinking of it, something that you gotta know is that to find all the tutorials and like get through them and stuff, the navigation site is way better than like Patreon's native navigation. So if you go to stephenbaumanartwork.com, there's a Patreon tab. Go to that. That's how you find all the tutorials and stuff. I just want to make sure that message is out there so everybody knows like how to get to this stuff, because otherwise, after like 3 years of tutorials, it can get a little bit inaccessible on Patreon. But all right, so we've got like a bunch of questions, and I'm just going to dive into them. And let's see, Keanu Nakua is saying, what are your thoughts or what are your techniques in good shading and ways of shading the head? Well, adding value really is all about planes. I think this is maybe something that gets like misunderstood a lot, is that like creating form and creating volume and doing all that stuff is like all about technique. It's only partially about technique. Like you have to have a good technique to like express ideas, but I think you need to understand, planes and three-dimensional form if you're going to do like good modeling and good shading on a head. MJ is asking, what's the difference between line quality and edges? And when organizing that hierarchy, do you do it for every area of the drawing, or is it a bit more of a feeling thing? I mean, at a certain point, like everything that you're going to do is a bit of a feeling thing, like once we start to kind of organize anything in our drawing, like you kind of start out as a student, it's like this really hyper conscious thing, like you're making like all comparisons between this value and the background and the value of halftones versus others, and then like as time goes on you get like maybe a little bit more comfortable. It's a little bit easier for you to just kind of do it on the fly, and it does become a kind of feeling thing. But line quality versus edge quality, I mean, they can coexist in a drawing. Like in this drawing we have lines and we have edges, right? However, like when you think about like a pretty strict hierarchy of line quality, you're usually talking about a line drawing rather than like a full value drawing. And so the distinction kind of comes there, though the method of organizing them in terms of a hierarchy is essentially the same. Bartholo is asking, what about the benefits of standing to draw as opposed to sitting? Yeah, well, when I was a student, we worked in sight size, which is a method that necessitates standing. Like you kind of can't do it seated. But I know like other academies, probably the vast majority of schools actually, you will sit down when doing it. So it just really means that you have to be attentive to your measurements, maybe in a slightly different way. And probably using comparative measurements is going to be, or definitely rather using comparative measurements is going to be much more useful to you. But I don't think there's really any harm in sitting down. I would recommend probably though that once or twice every hour or so, like you get up and you step back and you try to get kind of a big picture look at your drawing, because it is very easy, I think, for students to get wrapped up in details when they need to be kind of focusing on something a little bit more big picture. And so, like what happens when you're sitting down and you're drawing is this thing where you get like all the way up into your drawing and you kind of forget to look at that big picture stuff. So that's just the caveat that I would say if you're going to be working sitting down, you're going to need to make a conscious effort to get up and kind of get that big picture view. Let's see. MJ is saying squinting down seems to really help in informing what values to add and darken as the drawing progresses. Yeah, like squinting down is always, and it's funny. I remember when I was a student, like at the end of my first trimester at school, I remember like trying to like write down in my sketchbook, like what did you learn? I was so I wanted to like figure this stuff out so badly. I was like kind of taking notes and retroactively trying to understand things and making sure I didn't like skip anything or miss anything. And so I was like writing down in my notebook like what did I learn this term or this 3 months or whatever, and there were like maybe three things, which seems like very little for having studied a place 3 months. But one of them was squint down to check your values, and it's just a technique to help you understand like value comparison. When we have our eyes wide open, we see like tons of variety. When we squint down, things tend to unify a little bit. So yeah, it's something that I usually use to kind of test like how dark does this value need to be to separate from this value, right? Like right now, maybe they're a little bit too close. Here, they're a little bit more separate. So it also kind of helps in terms of like checking unity. So like when I'm looking at this area here and I'm trying to decide whether or not it's unified enough, like the areas that I'm like jumping through and filling in now are the areas that appear to be a little bit light when I'm squinting down. So that's how I kind of check for unity. You need to be able to like learn to like see that stuff if you're going to get used to kind of approaching it with technique and filling in all the values that you need to fill in. It's not just a matter of like just being at the paper. It's a matter of seeing it too. Let's see. Sarab Gurung is asking, how much time does it take you to complete a portrait in oil and a figure drawing in graphite? The ungenerous way to answer that is as long as it takes. Like some projects take longer than others. There's the rare portrait that is like I just can't figure out exactly what's holding it back from seeming finished to me, and so it can take longer. But I mean, mostly like if we're talking about a head like this, which is maybe you can see with my hand, it's not that big of a head. I'd probably say it takes about cumulatively 9 to 10 hours. A portrait in oil, of course, is different. I would say it takes 3 layers, which is going to be about 3 painting days. Each painting day is going to probably be 5, 6 hours, maybe 5 hours. So you'd say about 15 hours for something like that. And a figure drawing, again, it depends a little bit on the size. Without knowing the size that I'm saying, like it's kind of hard to say. Like if it's like maybe a 1/3 life size figure drawing, I would say, that'll take me 10 to 15 hours. Let's see. John Oates is asking, in the Gerald Ackerman the book, the Bark book by Gerald Ackerman, he speaks of 3 techniques for value modeling: stumping, veiling, and hatching. And he said veiling is not a term I've come across. Can you talk about the piece in each of your practice? Yeah, so veiling, I actually haven't come across that exactly either. What it sounds like it's referring to me though is we're talking about like adding a glaze essentially, or glazing down a value. So let's say that like all of this area needs to be one shade darker. I'm probably going to kind of just put a uniform like flat value over the top of what's there, and that would be how I would think of kind of veiling, or adding a unified value to an area. So, these things, they sound like they're going to be applied differently in different places. I think in general, it's a matter of like what's needed. So if this whole plane needs to get darker, I'm going to veil that. I'm going to like add like a whole layer of value there. If I'm just like searching out forms and things, usually then I'm like hatching. You can actually see a lot of the broken up kind of hatch marks in some of these areas. Um, and then what was the third one? The third one was stumping. Ah, well, stumping then like also is kind of like an early version of veiling. Like if I need to like get a whole area in my block in to like just drop off in value, then usually I'm going to be, like using my stump to do this. Um, yeah, so that's my take on it. I mean, like without having that passage from Ackerman in front of me, it's hard to say exactly what he's referring to, but that's what I would say it kind of means to me. Let's see. Eke Emmanuel is saying, I'm finding it hard to draw portraits. I need advice. I get you, man. Like we all do. Let's see. Hampus Hagnell says, have you ever tried drawing or painting on film, such as drafting film, vellum, or Duralar? And what are your thoughts on it? Um, I haven't tried maybe drawing on any of those. I was talking with a student the other day, and she said she'd actually been doing some drawings actually on vellum, and which is basically like a kind of, it's like what I would use for like transfer paper, like so to like trace a drawing and transfer it for to a canvas. But it has this kind of interesting tooth to it, like this interesting kind of roughness to it, that I think actually would be very cool to work with just on a drawing in general. So I don't really have like any carved in stone opinions about it. Um, I'm kind of curious as to how it would react, but I'm definitely like a victim all the time of the like kind of grass is always greener. I'm always thinking like, ooh, that paper sounds like it would be great, so I'll try it out, and I find that actually, I don't know, it's not so much better than really what I was using. Like each one has things that it does better than the others, but it's always like a give and take. So it will do this thing better, but it will do that thing worse, and so you kind of wind up, or I kind of wind up like just going back to what's consistent and what I'm used to. Most of the times, like I haven't shifted off of Stonehenge in like ages. So I mean, for whatever that tells you, I think that probably they're cool, but you're not gonna find out like how cool they are until you draw on them for several years. At least that's when I first started drawing on Stonehenge, I just thought like, oh, this is an alright paper. It's better than Canson for what I want to do. And Canson's a Meton paper, by the way. And then like over the years, it just kind of turned into like, well, that's kind of how I think of drawing, is the way that I draw on Stonehenge. Like this is Stonehenge. Which is, by the way, the coolest thing ever. So like Raymar is this company that makes, they make like painting panels mostly. But you guys know how like I stretch my paper over panels usually, um, because it just makes a much nicer surface to work on. I've always been like looking for a company that makes like paper panels, and now Raymar makes paper panels as well. And they sent me like, they had like an experiment batch of Stonehenge paper panels. They sent me some of them, and let me tell you, it is nice. It is a very nice service. Um, but yeah. Anyway, so that's this is Stonehenge, and that's kind of just my go to. I don't really tend to like go to too many different papers anymore. Let's see. MJ's asking, when do you stop using a stump in your process? It's so situational. I mean, generally by this point, I'm not really going to use a stump. But, that being said, if I'm working like down here in the background, maybe I actually want to like stump a little bit down here just to knock the like the white off of the paper, for instance, right? So there's no point where I say like, oh, I stop using it. But there's maybe things that like once the value gets like this refined, like I'm not really gonna use a stump in there, just because the stump is so it's like a shotgun, like it's a kind of blunt instrument, the stump. And so if I'm trying to be specific, I'm trying to get like really even tones and like fill in the paper and stuff, usually that means that the stump has gone away by that point. Yeah. By the way, huge controversial thing. This is big in the tiny world of what pencils do you use. So these Tombow mono pencils. For a while, I've been kind of recommending the Mitsubishi High Uni pencils because they're a good pencil. I'd received also, in addition to my enjoyment of them, like a couple other artists that whose opinions I put some stock in, had also like brought up independently to me that they like the Mitsubishi High Unis, and so I kind of recommended that as the, like, if you're going for a go-to pencil, like, go to Mitsubishi. I was talking with a student the other day, and he brought up something that I've actually been kind of like thinking about for a little while, and it just kind of triggered this like need for me to like get out there and say something about it. I think actually like my personal preference is for the Tombow mono pencils. Um, the Mitsubishi pencils are great, but just as a kind of like on the paper feel, I just happen to like them just a little bit better. So I'm revising my position on which pencils I really really prefer. I think the Tombow mono pencils now for me have eclipsed my appreciation for the Mitsubishi High Uni. Both of them are good pencils, and realistically, the difference is going to be marginal. But we're in a specific genre here, so let's be specific. Those are the ones that I really like. Let's see. A lot of questions coming in, and I need to scroll up to get to them. Rohan Rana is saying, what was the background made with? Graphite powder and water. Yeah, okay, right. So let's talk about this for a second. So one of the cool things about stretched paper, and one of the cool things about paper like this that is like adhered onto panel, is that you can actually you can disperse graphite powder in water, and you can apply that to the surface without like the paper buckling or doing anything weird, right? So I'm able to actually like kind of paint a value onto the surface and then just kind of continue working without really waiting for the paper to dry, for instance, like you would have to if your paper was, certainly if your paper like was just taped to a board, but also a little bit if you were as I often do, if you were drawing with your paper like just stretched onto a panel. So that's one of the other like really cool things about the Raymar panels, is that they give you that opportunity to like paint onto this. The surface is still solid. I just have to wait for it to dry, like, so I don't damage the paper a little bit. But it's an aqueous dispersion of graphite that's kind of painted onto the surface. And what it does is it like kind of gives you basically like a different kind of pencil to draw with, right? Like, when you're painting, you have like 100 different kinds of brushes. You have like bristle brushes, synthetic brushes, and brushes that do this and that, and like any other thing that you want to do, like there's a brush for that. Well, in drawing, like you kind of have pencils, right? Or you have a stump. So I'm always looking for ways, like different kinds of application that can give maybe like an interesting look or an interesting feeling to the drawing, and obviously painting graphite on, in these washes like you'd find with watercolor. I thought was like a really dynamic, really kind of interesting way to enliven a little bit that application, because you want your drawing to, I think, be cool on several levels. Like you'd like it to be like a cool image, like a cool pose. Which, by the way, like just so you know, this paper is like tilted from the camera. So like that's actually the flat angle of the paper. Like that is actually the angle of the camera. So there's a lot of distortion happening here. When it's released later on Patreon, I'll have fixed the perspective on that. But just to say, like, you want like a cool pose, right? And then on top of that, you would like really great technique, in terms of your drawing, rendering out that pose. And then on top of like good technique, you want like creative technique. And this is something that I always like look for in work. And I remember going to like exhibitions, even when I was a student, I think before I could kind of articulate this. And I was always looking for like applications of the material that would like surprise me, like solutions that I couldn't have come up with, or that I wouldn't have come up with, you know? So, you know, I'd remember there was an exhibition when I was in Florence up in a town. I don't even remember the name of it, but it was basically an exhibition about like the tradition of academic drawing in Tuscany, and I was fortunate enough to have a couple of pieces in that show, a couple of my student works. And so we went to the exhibition, and there was a painting there by, oh, what was her name? Oh my goodness. The name is totally escaping me. Uh, but she was the teacher of a teacher of mine. Um, oh my goodness, this is horrible. Uh, wow. She was in like the last, like people in line with the like Nerina Simi. Nerina Simi was the artist. She was the daughter of Philadelpho Simi, who had studied, I think, with Jerome in Paris in the 19th century. Um, but anyway, she had a figure study in that show, and there's this really curious way that she was painting, where like the brushstrokes were like going like along and across the form, all the way across the body, like they were traversing like diagonally across the figure. It's just never an effect that I'd even thought of, like, why would you do that, let alone how would you do that, you know? So I just remember it like made such an impression on me, like as a practitioner, that. So I understood like there was this stimulation that I got also from like interesting techniques. And so I think that was kind of when I started realizing, that I was really a technique nerd, and that was like my destiny. Anyway, uh, wow. So that was one question, right? Daniel Morse is asking, have you ever used Stadler Mars Lumograph black pencils? No graphite shine, darker values, less messy than charcoal. This is weird, Daniel. Actually, that I was talking with. So I do like mentorship meetings with students, right? So like on Patreon, there's a small group of students that are at a higher tier that I'm able to meet with one on one, and kind of work with on developing their work and their skills and things. And so yesterday was one of the days when I was meeting with people, and I had a conversation. I just said earlier that like about the Tombow pencils, the same student I was talking with about. I think he had been, no, sorry, there's a different student. Um, I'm embarrassed. Uh, so it was a different student, but he was actually using those exact pencils, and I'd never heard of them, and I thought, oh, I've got to, like, I'm duty bound to kind of check that out, because it sounded pretty cool that you could get like nice dark values without a lot of shine. I don't usually have like a ton of like shine problem in my work, because I don't tend to go like too dark. But anytime that there's like a different like graphite pencil formula out there, I feel like I have to check it, because inevitably, somebody's gonna ask me about it. So stay tuned. I will eventually get to a place where I've tried it out, and I'll talk about it here. Let's see. Gopal Shinde is asking, what are best pencils to use? It sounds like you could check out my FAQs post. There's a link in the description of this live stream. And if you go to that, there's all sorts of pencil and brush recommendations, free of charge. MJ's asking tips for drawing lips and when to outline. Well, when you're drawing lips, pretty much never outline would be, I guess, the idea. Like there's a lot of ways to like flatten out lips, and one of them is kind of outlining that upper contour of it. That's something I like to keep soft, something I like to keep a little bit more transitional. And so for that reason, like yeah, I will very rarely outline them. Usually you'll get like a cast shadow like this one that has a pretty distinct edge, and then the other edge that I'll reserve for myself will be that horizontal center line in between the two. I try to give a little bit of punch to an edge like that. But otherwise, that upper edge, I really try to keep soft. Let's see, David Lund is saying, "Hi, Stephen. I'm working on a pencil portrait, and I've marked the paper and can't erase with an eraser." I feel you, David. I'm a bit apprehensive about using sandpaper in case it makes it worse. What would you recommend? Do not use sandpaper. Don't use sandpaper. No, sandpaper will so like when paper is made, like the final surface of it usually has like this kind of, it's not quite like sealed, but like the size that's in the paper has created like a homogeneous surface there. And so if you go in with sandpaper, what you're going to do is you're going to make one area really like fluffy, you know, like and the rest of the paper is not going to be that way. And so you're going to have these really different surfaces. And I think that you would be much happier if you just uh, kept going and didn't focus on it, and then just saw like what the real look of it at the end was. Because probably like the fact that you're kind of struggling with it a little bit means that you're probably drawing a lot in that area, you're focusing a lot on that area, and so whatever, you know, problems that you're seeing there are probably a little bit amplified by that. I mean, that's just my guess without seeing it, but I would refrain from sandpaper. I just think it's not often, well, unless you've already sanded the entire paper, then I think it's probably not a good idea. Like there are artists like where their practice is, and I've done this actually as well, like where you sand down the entire surface of the paper. So the sanded down surface is actually the homogeneous surface. And because of that, you can do things like, you know, sanding down in the middle of your process, and it doesn't like really kind of interrupt what the appearance on the surface of the paper is. So unless that is the case, I would really refrain from sanding down. I say that because, by the way, David, I've been there, I've done it, and I've certainly regretted it. Yeah, and that's just yeah, it's a tough spot. But like I said, probably it's not that. I hate to say it, but probably it's not that big a deal actually. You know, just erase as best you can and kind of try to make a really great drawing around that. All right. Let's see. Gention Quelli is asking, I saw some cast paintings from some academies. Can you tell me the steps or how students do them? They seem so hard. Yeah, no, I mean, cast painting is hard. All right, so this brings up what's really cool. People, the announcement will come out in April. The atelier tier is happening. I've got lesson plans that I'm outlining. I've got at least the first trimester, the first 3 months of it kind of planned out. And we're going to be going back in time, back to the absolute bottom line, starting humble, essential things that happen to a drawing student at the academy. And that's going to be happening. Like I said, announcement comes April 1st. Realistically, probably first session is May 1st. And we're going to be getting back into beginning bargs, and it's going to follow a similar format to the other live workshops that I've been doing. So I need to find my eraser. Hang on, people. What on earth did I do with it? Well, I don't have my needed eraser, which is a tragedy. But let's see like how far I can get without it. But your question was about cast paintings. Yeah, so eventually we'll do bar drawings, right? We're going to go through them. I'm going to actually demo the Belvedere torso and like talk you through that as well. We're going to go through simplified bargs as well. Then we're going to get into cast drawing and then eventually cast painting. Now, listen, I love these subjects. I love cast drawing. I love cast painting. There's no way I can give you a synopsis here of all the things that kind of go into cast painting, but suffice to say, it is a great place to learn to kind of understand how to control oil paint. And that is going to be, you know, in the future, but it's going to be super in-depth. So stay tuned, please. Ian London is asking, "Hi Stephen, would you recommend any references for constructive anatomy of the head face for portraits?" That's an interesting one. Constructive anatomy for the head and face. Like who's out there like that already has a great course for it? I guess is the question. Hmm. I'm kind of I don't know. I'm kind of stumped because I feel like there's you probably want something a little bit more like comprehensive, and I'm just not sure of like who has the great course about that yet. And it's mostly just because like I spend so much time trying to make my own courses that I don't really get to get out there and kind of explore in depth like what other courses are going on. I mean, you're never gonna go wrong, checking out some of Stan Prokopenko's content. But it's not like he doesn't really do like a comprehensive constructive portraiture course. Like he just has his portraiture course, which is a very good one. But I'm thinking that you're thinking like something that you would find at the Russian Academy, and I just don't have off the top of my head. I don't have that out there. Yeah, sorry, but I'll think about it. If I think of something, I'll bring it up later. Let's see. El Buen Yargar is saying, "What are your thoughts on the scale of your heads on the paper? I've struggled with smaller faces, and sometimes I would make a bigger head and find myself rendering huge planes." Yeah, there's a few things about that actually. So, yeah, my initial reason for like drawing heads at about the scale that you see this one is that I kind of like the mannequin-esque feeling of them, right? Like they are because they're so much smaller than life size, you have this slightly kind of voyeuristic feeling like there's this like smaller world that you're like looking into through this window. And I know that's just like me thinking that, but that's the effect that I get from them. And it's kind of a cool thing to talk about in terms of, what different scales, like what effect that they have on the viewer. I remember when I was, this is like before I even studied at the academy, I was a student at this art school in North Florida, and there was an exhibition on there of this woman who had done these kind of life-size figurative sculptures. Now they were like made out of like different weird stuff or whatever because it was contemporary, so they were like made out of chicken wire and like I don't know tin cans or something, and but like there was a really cool thing that like I was looking at the exhibition. I was the only one there like that day, and just kind of walking around it, and like a life-size sculpture in an empty gallery with you, like has this kind of presence. It's like a bit different, maybe even a little bit unnerving. And so like life-size work has a particular effect. Smaller than life-size work has a particular effect. So I think it's kind of for me it was an artistic choice um, in terms of like why I choose to kind of draw at this scale. It's just something about it that I feel like connects to the kind of feeling I want to evoke in my work. Life-size portraits can be in a lot of ways like so confrontational, which is its own kind of cool thing, but that's not really where I'm looking to be. MJ's asking if I listen to some Beatles music. I think when I was in high school, I liked a lot of like old 60s rock. I was really into, Zeppelin and stuff. Or actually, well, that's more, no, I would say actually that was more kind of junior high. And then as I got a bit older, like I got into like punk rock and things. And I was reading, there was a great rock critic of the era called Lester Bangs. If anybody out there has ever read um, his book Psychotic Reactions in Carburetor Dung, which is a kind of compendium of his articles that he wrote for Cream, which was a rock magazine, kind of like Rolling Stone, but I guess not as popular. But eventually, right, this book comes out, and I read it, and so at that time I got really more into like the Stooges and Iggy Pop and like a lot of kind of heavier stuff. I mean, the Beatles, make great pop music. Nothing against them, but my tastes have kind of gone a different direction. Let's see, Steve Singley asks, what point do you render a portrait as finished? Yeah, tough one. I mean, it's kind of abstract, right? Like, when is it finished? It's kind of someone was asking like, how long does a drawing take you? It just kind of takes as long as it takes. Um, when usually like my line, and I say this to students a lot, my line for like when I'm finished usually is when I no longer have any momentum to do anything else to it. Like, so you just feel like I don't feel like creatively drawn to doing anything more to this portrait. So like then, yeah, it's kind of has to be done. Like I don't have a choice but for it to be done. So there it is. Yeah, but it's all about kind of enthusiasm. It's like one of these jobs, which by the way, like being an artist, it's a job. I don't work for anybody else, but it's still a job. Or maybe I work for all of you out there. Like in a way, but. Like I don't have anybody telling me, oh, that has to be better, that has to be good enough, or that's not good enough, or whatever, or saying, oh, you did a great job. I don't really get that kind of feedback. So I have to have like an inner kind of gauge for when I'm going to be doing my best work and when I'm not, and it usually just relates to before I go to work that day, like, do I feel like, oh man, I'm like on fire. Oh, I've got like all these ideas. I want to like try this effect over here, and I think if I did this to the whatever, to the highlights, I could get that effect. Those kind of thoughts. When those stop occurring to me, usually it's a signal, it's a sign that the time has come, and gone for that drawing. Like it's kind of I've exhausted my creativity, I guess. Which is a muscle that like gets stronger as you work more. Like I remember as a student, you kind of you run out of stuff to do sometimes pretty quickly, and that's why it's good to have a teacher around to say like, no, 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 you need to like try this or try that and see if you can pull off this, and they have a vision that kind of extends a little bit beyond yours, like they can see things that you can't because they've kind of been there before. And that's like a lot of the value that you can also get from them. So I just need to get this halftone, and I'm like blocking the screen, I know, but yeah. So Veba Garg is asking, what is the difference between a master study and a master copy? Can you study while copying a piece? They're essentially kind of the same thing. Yeah. Gopal Sinda or Shinda is asking, is there any video on sharpening and preparing pencils? Yeah, actually, in my materials video, which if you go to stephenbaumanartwork.com, go to the Patreon section, there's a materials icon, and you can go to that. And actually, I'm pretty sure that the drawing materials is actually just open to the public. So you can watch it there. And in that, I actually show how I go about sharpening my pencils. So if you're really really into what that is, or the technique that I use to do that, it's there. You just have to kind of wade through the rest of the materials talk, I guess, to get to it. Let's see. Feshko Gululu is asking, I feel like I forgot how to see things when I draw in shapes and values. It's been taking me longer to get things goodish. Does that happen to you? Um, does it take longer? I mean, there's times that I make more mistakes. Yeah. I mean, I think that's probably pretty natural. Like, nobody's at like optimal levels all the time. I think a lot about productivity because I have so many different kind of things going on, in different places. Not least of which now is that I've decided I'm going to do a book, and so like all of the side energy that I have like goes into orchestrating and organizing for that. But so then you start to think about like, oh, in this amount of weeks time I should have X, Y, and Z done. And it's really easy to imagine that, or to schedule that like all the time you spend working is optimal time. But it's not. Like we don't, like there's days where like, oh, I didn't sleep well, or oh, I got sidetracked by this other thing that, like whatever, some tax agency needs this information from me, and so I couldn't get to to work at the studio that day, and like there's all sorts of stuff like that happens. You just have to kind of you have to put that in the plan, like that stuff's gonna be weird. So so that's how like I kind of make peace with my schedule, because otherwise, I'd just be thinking like, oh, I should have done this, you should have done that, or if only I'd have had time for this and that and the other thing. It's like, you have to like kind of live in the real world. Like your schedule is kind of a fantasy world a little bit. Anyway, that's my take on that. Nick B is asking, instead of layering, do you ever use darker pencils, 6B, 8B? I do use darker pencils, like a 6B, like this one. But even so, I still layer them. The layering is more about being sure or certain of the accuracy of your drawing, rather than like just being an effect to get right. Like the reason that I start out light is that I want to make sure that I place all the features accurately. If I can do that, then after that, using darker pencils is good. But I always still think like graphite looks best when it's kind of layered like that. It doesn't tend to like quickly applied graphite, as far as like value planes go. I'm not really in love with the effect that you get from that. So much halftone in this piece. Like part of the thing too, this one is that like you got that kind of light coming in a little bit more from the front here, and we're kind of viewing really from the side. This is a lot of like subtle soft value to kind of build up here before I get to an interesting place with it. Let's see. Daniel Morris is asking, do you prefer alla prima style in oil painting or a classical indirect layered approach in general? What are the primary benefits of both for painting realistically? I think they're kind of like personality things, actually. Like I'm somebody who, this is all right. So there's like some taboos in the art world, right? Where if you've ever had like an art teacher, I know that they have said to you, like, you have to think about the process. It's all about the process. It's not about the product. You can't think about the product because, maybe I don't know. Anyway, whatever. There's all sorts of reasons why you're supposed to like not think about the product. It turns out that I'm actually really product oriented. Like if I work and work and work and work, and then like nothing comes out of it, or like I come out of it with like a really bad drawing that I want to throw away, like that does not do anything for my motivation. That's a massive like demotivator for me. And so I had to kind of realize on my own, because like all the signaling you get from everybody about it is pretty definitive in the opposite direction. I had to kind of realize on my own that like, yeah, like I'm product oriented. I need to work in a way that at least, if not guarantees, but at least gives a good opportunity to have a result. Also because like I live in the real world and I'm a professional, and like if I paint for a month and don't have anything that comes out of it that's useful, like that doesn't work. You can't be a professional and have that be the case. So in any event, I think it comes down to mentality, because some people are not like that. Some people like, they just like to work endlessly on something, and that's their process, and that's totally cool. No problem with that whatsoever. So like if you're somebody who you find like you're really, really like product oriented, in a way like alla prima painting can be very good for you, because like at the end of every session, that's what you came up with, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but there's like a tangible result that came out of it. When you're kind of painting indirectly and you're doing a lot of like, different techniques and stuff, you can paint sometimes for, sorry, you can paint sometimes for ages without really anything like coming out of it. And I know this because, by the way, like I do love the aesthetic of indirect paintings and so on. I think it was kind of my first passion in painting, was for that appearance. Now I kind of have maybe a hybrid in between the two, that I try and like set myself a series of layers. Like I usually won't paint more than 3 complete passes on a painting. the logic being in that I feel like if I can't get it in 3 passes, probably I'm not going to get it. The effect that I'm looking for. So rather than like just sticking in and just doing layer after layer after layer, like kind of crossing my fingers and kind of doing the same thing and hoping for a different result, I go like, well, that's the finished painting. That's where I got it to. That's where I'm at, like in this moment. It doesn't mean that's where I'm at forever. That's where I'm at for now. So that's my feeling about it. There's some great alla prima painters. There's some great indirect painters, and there's the opposite of that too, as well. Let's see. Oh, all right. A lot of questions coming in. By the way, everybody that's watching here, I really appreciate you being here. Something you can do to help me out that costs you nothing at all is to just like this video, subscribe to this channel. That really helps kind of boost the video, boost the live stream, and that in turn encourages me to do like more of these because the channel's like growing, and that's really positive for me. So if you'd like to like and subscribe, that would be super awesome. I really appreciate it. But let's see, more questions coming in. Lucrecia Lopez says, hello and thank you in Spanish, and then a question in Spanish. I think about Spanish subtitles. Yes, I've addressed some other questions about that too. Brain Dead Starcraft is saying, do you paint as often as you draw? It's maybe 50-50. Yeah, probably. MJ is asking, what are your thoughts on shape design? I mean, there's a lot, but shape design is like you start to get like into aesthetics, where you're talking about like what is a beautiful shape, like what is an ideal shape, and that can be like a little bit of like a cultural thing. I think there's a really like wonderful culture of design actually among a lot of digital painters, partly because it's so easy to make many projects and many revisions, that like the freedom with which they can mark and demark things gives them a great opportunity to kind of create a lot of fantastic dynamic shapes. By the way, I really need my kneaded eraser, so I need to find it. Hang on. I've got my like massive pencil cup here, and it's at the bottom of it. So like I said, in general, I feel like, that is the place probably where the culture of shape design, I think, is probably strongest, currently in terms of like visual representation and so on. Whereas painters, a lot of times, sometimes rather the limitation of the medium can mean that they don't revise their shapes enough or as brutally. And so they come up with shapes sometimes that are a little bit less aesthetic, less appealing, less dynamic, less cool, so that can happen. However, right, there are some painters who, because of the nature of the medium, they also go in the other direction, where I think that they are, because you need to be so deliberate, they kind of pick their spots in a really good, really efficient way. One of those painters is an artist called Rupert Alexander. And I think like in his work, you want to look at shape design, like that guy consistently like just blows my mind. Like there's a saying about like with graphic designers, right, that like when you're like designing a logo and things, like a lot of times you'll like deliver the logo, and the client is looking at it and going like, it's like the simplest thing ever. It's like it doesn't even look like it took any work, but like the work of the graphic designer was to remove everything that didn't feel right, so that like that logo at the end has to look like effortless. And so like it's kind of like a little bit misleading just by its nature, right? Like if it looked like really labored, it wouldn't fit its purpose. So like I feel like Rupert, in his work, he's able to make these shapes that are so incredibly designed, that in fact, like looking at them, they look deceptively simple. And that's something that I really enjoy in his work, is that ability to deceive us a little bit and make it seem like there's no other shape that he possibly could have made in that space. Like it was naturally like left there on the canvas by fate. Anyway, that's my own like shape fantasy. Um, Energy Fitness says, back in design classes with ad marketers, vellum lets you use both sides of the paper for transparent tones coming from the underside. Whoa, I never even thought about that. It's kind of fascinating. Let's see. Velba Garg says, what's the difference between a master study and a master copy? I think I answered that one earlier. JD Anarchy is saying, you shaved. I did. I had too much beard going on. Moritz Art is asking, are Faber-Castell pencils also okay? It is a little bit of like a personal choice. I'm not maybe as familiar with Faber-Castell. I do use some Faber-Castell LEDs for my 2mm LED holders. So, yeah, like I use them. It's just like if you like the feel. Like for instance, I talk a lot about those Staedtler Mars Lumograph pencils and say like I'm not really a big fan of them. They just have a really crisp, hard feel to them, and that's not my favorite thing. And so because of that, like I don't like them. But if you were looking for a pencil that did that, they would be like the best pencil because they do exactly that thing. So are they okay? For sure, they're all right. Like, yeah, why not? But at the same time, if you gotta like kind of describe the qualities of them. Like, what is the lead? What is like the formula like? JD Anarchy is asking if this picture is in the Patreon model packs. Not yet, but actually with this model, I just she was a model I worked with actually before I did Patreon. So any of the images I had of her, I didn't have like an image release form for. Which, by the way, any of you that like are ambitious about kind of doing things online or whatever, and you're working with models, it is important to get a release form signed to put into your in your files, so that you can use, like for instance on this live stream, like so that I can use the image of her. I kind of have to do that, so it's kind of likeness rights and things. But in any event, I didn't have that before, but I got back in touch with her and kind of signed it retroactively, paid her because it costs a lot more to hire models where you're going to have the image rights. But so I paid her retroactively for those, and so now I have the kind of possibility to put these in model packs and use them on live streams and things. So it will be there soon. Yeah, definitely when this is released on Patreon, it'll be there, but it's in the plans. Let's see. Maurice Art is asking, what is a value? A value just refers to the relative lightness or darkness of an area on a grayscale. So this is a light value, a darker value, the darkest value. Ayaf Sharif is asking, have you ever tried drawing from imagination? He's saying that he kind of is not good at it. I promise that one day I'm going to do a live stream where I just draw from imagination. And that's going to go great or bad. I do draw and sketch a little bit from imagination, but it's usually just for the purposes of like, figuring out an idea or a compositional idea. Like what I'd like something to look like. I rarely do it as like, I don't really make art from imagination or make drawings that I have finished artistic aims from imagination. So, I've done plenty of drawings from imagination that are bad. Like probably the majority of my drawings from imagination are bad, but it's usually just fit to purpose. Like I'm not really all that concerned with them being great, because my work is kind of primarily observational, and I'm kind of creative within within that observation. So I kind of take what I see and I use the parts of it that I find most interesting to me. Let's see. Cat K Cat is asking, Staedtler Lumograph Black are essentially carbon pencils. Really dark, but feel very different from graphite. See, I might not like them because of that, actually, but we'll see. Nick B is asking, why is achieving uniform shading so hard no matter how graceful I try to be with a pencil? Can I blame the sketchbook paper or is this a cop-out? It's a skill. You know, there's several skills that you build as a student, right? It's not like learning to draw is the way we say it, but in reality, learning to draw is learning like many different things. Like, so you need to strengthen your visual memory in order to learn to draw. You need to gain a better technique with your pencil to learn to draw. You know, so all these things are like a part of skills that you will build at different stages and different levels and to different degrees of excellence. And because of that, you know, at the start, yeah, probably you won't be fantastic with in control of your graphite. So that's just that comes with the job, I guess. C. Hosh is asking, hi Stephen, what is the hardness of the lead in your red mechanical pencil? So, well, fair question, but I have two red mechanical pencils here that are 0.3 millimeters, and you can see I have like different tops for them. The pink topped red pencil is a B hardness, and the red topped red pencil is, if I remember correctly, a 2H or an H. And I always do this with my mechanicals and usually my 2mm lead holders as well, as I have like a couple different varieties of them, one soft, one hard, so that like depending upon where I'm drawing, I'm usually going to pick one or the other. So like when you see me drawing kind of down here in these darker areas, usually I'm going to be using this one. Unless I'm like kind of filling in the holes of the paper, then I might switch to the harder one. But it's a cool question, but of course a little bit of a complex answer. That's how it is sometimes. Goncalo Almieda is saying, will these references be available at Patreon at some point? Absolutely. David Lund is saying, thank you. No problem, David. Ayan Sharif is saying, any thoughts on the divine proportion used by Renaissance artists? To be honest, like I'm not like so well versed on Renaissance artist techniques and things, so I'd probably be speaking about out of turn if I got into that. Yikes McKee says, I was recently watching a tutorial on pen and ink and nibs, and the teacher said it was an archaic technique, and I was wondering if you agreed. Do you do any pen and ink work yourself? No, I don't, but you know, there's like with any technique, I mean, it's kind of, there's going to be older forms of it, older versions of it. But there are some like artists right now that are out there making pen and ink drawings that are, you know, very, I think, contemporary. So is the technique like itself archaic? I mean, I don't know if I really have an opinion about that. But certainly like it's an old technique, you know, you can look back, as long as there have been inks, there have been like artists using ink, and probably, you know, ink was in use probably earlier than graphite. But anyway, I digress. I mean, is it archaic or not? I don't know, but there's plenty of artists using it today that I think are really cool. Abraham Gonzalez is asking what paper it is. This is Stonehenge, that is adhered on a vacuum table to a hardboard panel by a company called Raymar. Fantastic, fantastic product. Listen, it's not inexpensive, but it's really, really good. Art A is asking, you mentioned briefly in the past that in order to recognize shadow shapes, I must open my eyes wide rather than squint. Would you please elaborate on that? I have trouble finding the Terminator. Yeah, so what happens when you squint down, right? Look at these two values. When you squint down, those two values kind of turn into the same value. They blend together. When I open my eyes, I can see a little bit more clearly the difference in between the two. Effectively, this is what's happening when you're squinting down, is you're actually diminishing the amount of information that gets into your eye in terms of value distinction, and so it makes it more difficult to distinguish in between two values which are very similar. For instance, the dark halftone and the shadow. So because of that, in order to see the shadow shape or the shadow edge really well, you need to open your eyes and search for it. That being said, like you also have to kind of understand some things about the dynamic of shadows and like how those work to also be able to kind of see it. It's one of those things that once you learn to see it, you can't stop seeing it, but until you do see it, you can't see it. I would suggest to you cast drawing as a way to study that. In fact, in the Drawing Essentials Part 3 video, I have a whole section where I'm just explaining like how to see the shadow shapes on the cast and how that works. So if you're really, really committed to wanting to know about that, it's a long explanation, but it's also one that's already out there. So you can definitely track that down if you would like to. Let's see, what are the questions we got? Toby Michael's asking, oh, New Masters Academy does a good constructive portrait and figure course. Thank you for bringing that up, Toby. Yeah, there was a question earlier about like who has a good constructive portraiture course. I think it's the one Ilya Mirochnik did with them. Is probably that's probably the a good online source for I think constructive drawing. Yeah, so that's thanks for that, Toby. Daniel Morris is saying, do you think learning a musical instrument or drawing an oil painting are more difficult? What are the biggest differences in how you learn them, do you think? I think a lot of times, like artists, like I'll talk about the similarities in learning them. I think, like there's an analog to like learning your scales where what you're doing is you're kind of like practicing over and over. Like I did when I was very young, I did like, I don't know, a few months of piano lessons before I convinced my parents that, or my mother that, I shouldn't have to go because I didn't like it. But, which, in retrospect, do I regret? Maybe a little bit, but what are you going to do? I don't think my aptitude was for piano playing anyway. But what I wanted to say was, it's kind of a similar thing. Like you practice your scales over and over, not so that you can play the scales, but so that that becomes like an unconscious part of your skill set, like a second nature, right? Like if you're searching for all you piano players out there, if you're searching for middle C, you're not going to be able to play the music. Like your hands need to know where that space is, so that you can think rapidly. So just like with drawing, if you're thinking on the top of your head, I wonder what pencil I should use to make this value shape, you already are at a deficit, right? Like that needs to become something that is very second nature to you. So like kind of practicing simple value exercises, and even more importantly, like learning how the pencils behave on the paper. Like I have, an area here where I need to build up value, but it's already got some cross hatching on it. Like, what do I want to do first? Probably first I'll take a softer lead and kind of fill in, and then go in with a harder lead and like kind of tick away at some of the little spots that are kind of left up or left open in order to make it feel a little bit more finished. So those kind of things need to be like just ingrained behavioral kind of understanding. So that you can eventually, aspire to like make artwork. It's as students, and listen, I'm saying this, I was there, I know this is true. As students, we aspire probably a little bit too soon to make artwork. The fact is, like all the stuff that's required to make really great representational artwork, you're just building for the future, and that's cool. And you're going to do fun and really cool, really amazing stuff while you're building up to that. But like the payoff is like, it's down the road in my experience. I mean, that's what it was for me. I'll say that, but anyway, I digress. P. Ben says, hey, for the constructive anatomy question. Yeah, he's talking about New Masters Academy. Yep. And David Lynn says Iggy Pop is awesome. I couldn't agree more. Oh wait, sorry, I have to scroll up. YouTube just kind of scrolled me past the comments. Hugo Goncalves says, I tend to abandon things very close from the end. I often do a small mistake I can't forgive whenever I see the finish line. Lots of redraws. Aiming perfection can be such a I think there's an autocorrect problem at the end, but saying basically like you know, I think he's kind of talking about perfectionism, right? And you know, I had this phase, you know, when I was a student where I just really, like Frank, I really hated all the work that I was making. I was just like, oh, it's just terrible. Like I could see like so many problems with it. Like in fact, kind of all the things that I could see were just the problems. Um, yeah, part of that's because I was in an environment like at a school where, you know, I mean, it was, whew, I mean, the standards were incredibly sky high. Um, and that like drives you forward, but it also drives you mad a little bit, you know, because you start to obsess about, you know, your work is only a collection of mistakes that you could have done better, you know. Um, I mean, the healthy perspective on that is just to go like, yeah, you know, this is where I'm at right now, and I want it to be better, and I'm gonna work to make it better, but also, you know, I can't magically get to that place where I'm already excellent. Um, so it's a mixture of like kind of acceptance and also, you know, like really, really high standards. I think that eventually you want to shoot for. Um, you know, if you're gonna again be able to do this professionally. I mean, some of this too is like, you know, you got to think about. I think it really impacted me when like I went pro, like I graduated, and it's like, all right, now you're supposed to be an artist that's trained. Well, let's see all that artwork that you're gonna make. And I was like, well, I still like hate all my work. Like I still think it's all terrible. And I made, oh my goodness, people. Oh, I look. This is like a cringe-worthy, you know, shame well type of experience. I remember I was lucky enough when I was a student to be working with a gallery I was in New York and Long Island, and I can't tell too many details about this. But so I was a student, but I was working with them, and then I had graduated, and I still was working with them, and the gallerist came to Florence to visit my studio and kind of check out work that I had available, and I was talking about this like self portrait that I had sent her. I said like, oh, you know, I was never really satisfied with the drawing on that one, you know. And she says back to me like, "Oh, I was thinking about buying that one." And like in that moment, I knew that I had not understood my audience. Like I was talking with one of my artist friends, but I was talking to somebody for whom, you know, like this was a much more or should have been a much more professional interaction. Um, and so, you know, like you can feel whatever you want about your work, you know, you can always strive to improve and stuff. But you kind of got to know what the situation is, you know, like a gallerist is not the place to vent your frustrations about like the quality of your work. Like that's something for, you know, that's something for the pub when you're like hanging out with your friends and your colleagues and talking to them about that, or you're talking to your spouse or significant other, you know, you can vent all you want, but you know, when the gallerist is there, that's kind of showtime. Huge digression. Sorry. Uh, do do do. So I'm just looking for some questions. There's a few comments here. Gentian Quelli is asking, "What do you think of the book Practice and Science of Drawing by Harold Speed?" What do you mean? Like that's like the book, like that's the one. Harold Speed is, you know, he put it down on paper, you know, for perpetuity, and it's a great book. Everybody should have a copy of it. Everybody should have a highlighter when they're reading it, because a lot of the kind of knowledge base that you need for kind of painting and drawing, you know, is contained very well inside of that. And I'm not a like a what's the word? Like I've read like a lot of drawing books, but there's not many that were like, oh, like that made such an impact, you know. But Speed is one of those ones where it's like that's the yeah, that gets to the heart of the matter. I feel like Harold Speed does. So I'm all on board for Harold. Any tips for preventing warping when using Spectrafix? Corin Breer is asking this. Here's the deal. Because Spectrafix is like kind of a water base, rather than alcohol or whatever other like kind of solvent they're putting in these aerosol fixatives, it can have a tendency to cause the paper to warp a little bit. And I guess that I actually don't usually think of that because, like I said, I'm normally working on like paper that's been stretched. So if the paper that I'm using warps, it just goes back to being flat. So I guess like I'll give you two advices. One would be start stretching your paper. It's a superior experience. It's better when you're framing it. Like there's every reason in the world to stretch your paper, and there's a tutorial on stretching your paper on my Patreon. It's explicit in no uncertain terms about how to do things, and you can access it through my navigation website, which is stephenbaumanartwork.com. That being said, if you have paper that is wobbly, or you want to avoid it being wobbly, I honestly I can't really say. You just have to use maybe a lot less of the Spectrafix at a time, like do several very light layers, and you're likely to have a little bit less disruption in the surface of the paper. But even then, it could be a little bit. Yeah, it's a tough spot, but I would just say it's a great moment to just make the change and say like, now I'm stretching paper. Or like I said, alternatively, these Raymar panels, they're not available to the public yet, but they will be. The manufacturer has assured me in the very near future, at which point I would just say, great, start using those. Because once again, like there's no kind of disruption to the surface. So that is a really cool thing. And this is just, kind of proof of that. You can see like I can kind of paint onto the surface of my drawing with water, with graphite kind of bound in water. And it creates again like this really like kind of cool kind of vibe on the surface. You can see my hands get like full of graphite dust and stuff as well. So it's about like wipe my nose with like graphite all over my face. Let's see. Varun Tulsian is asking, do you doodle or sketch randomly in a sketchbook or take breaks from bigger refined pieces? Or does a break consist of just not doing art at all? Cool question. Sometimes, yeah, I do need like a break from all art related activities. It's a funny thing about, when you're starting out, you think like, man, I can't wait for my job to be like just being an artist. Like I used to work in restaurants and things. I was even for a period of time, I even was a dishwasher at a restaurant I was a dishwasher at a folk music restaurant that had like open mics like almost every night. The amount of times that I have heard an acoustic amateur version of that American Pie, like that Don McLean song, is outrageous. And while like covered in just dish soap and gazpacho, like it was horrible. And I remember thinking back then, like, I can't wait till my job is to just be an artist. And listen, it's great, to get to that place. However, there, everything is a kind of give and take. Everything's a kind of a check and a balance. And you do get to these places where you get kind of saturated with it, and you just you kind of stop having the ability to like see what's so cool about it sometimes. And that's the curse. That's the where you try to kind of take a break and balance yourself out and kind of maybe rediscover a little bit, those things that you loved about it when you just couldn't wait to get the time to do it. So I guess that's my my little history lesson take on that subject. JD Anarchy is saying, I don't know if you remember from the last live, He said, I told you I would tell you whether I liked the Pentel Oren's 0.2 millimeter pencil. Yeah, so this is a 0.3 mechanical, and they make a 0.2 mechanical, which, like I said, I've tried out, but not with any great success. And he says he has to tell you that it's awesome, and he hasn't broken any leads yet. Quick question, JD. What lead hardness are you using in your 0.2 millimeter? And also, what lead ranges are available for 0.2? Because I think it would be really cool, like in terms of like getting even textures, that smaller diameter can kind of get you into tighter areas. So that'd be really interesting. Let us all know like what ranges are available. Henrique DLDR is saying, hey, Stevens, greeting. Coming along really well. Congrats. Thank you. Rosalie Rizzo is saying, do you approve of using a paper stump in any of your drawings? The saturation of of medium material on the ends of these should answer that question for you. El Ensayista is saying, hey Stephen, I was wondering what is your absolute favorite artist? Also books you recommend for improving drawing and painting. As for the books thing, the FAQs post, which there is a link to in the description of this video, has a list of all the books that I recommend. And then it's like an absolute favorite artist. That's tough. It's so tough, right? Like it's because as soon as you say one, then you think of another. It's like even with favorite foods, it's like as soon as you say, oh, like I like this, and then you bring up another one, you go, oh, but I like that too. I think it's more like that there's artists, there's like so many different artists that I think are out there interpreting things in a way that I think is really amazing. Like there's an artist right now who I follow on Instagram. I forget her name, but the name of the account is Black Gold Sun. No spaces in between the words. And she's like kind of making these digital paintings that have such a great sense of like shape design. They have such a great sense of like color improvisation. I mean, they hit so many spots for me. Like they're really, really great. So I think like when I think about like work that I love, like that's what I'm thinking of right now. And that's gonna change, as soon as I, do research for my next course, I'm gonna go like, oh, I'm all into, this artist or that artist. So for me, it's like I don't think there like can be one. There's just so many of them, and they're all like kind of great for kind of slightly different reasons, it's nearly impossible to say one or the other. Yeah. Timothy Henry is saying, do you have any particular people that you use as inspiration for your style? I love your work, by the way. I use everybody for inspiration. And this is what I would also recommend to all of you out there. Like, we all kind of get really into, one artist or whatever. And that's good, like, to kind of dive deep on someone or someone's work. But in my own work, in practice, like I literally everybody, every painter that I follow on IG, right, has something that I think like, ooh, I really like that. I need to incorporate that in my work, Like you look at Michael Klein's work, and it's got this wonderful, like really organic quality that he's able to like kind of make peace with in his work, and it kind of gives his paintings this feeling that they just like arrived there, and that's great. You look at Rupert Alexander, and he has just eye melting shape design. You look at another artist like Amaya Gurpide, and she has like this tremendous sense of like space and presence like in her drawings, right? And that's like really hard to define stuff. So there's all these artists that are out there like doing something really cool, and I look to every single one of them for inspiration, because as an artist, it's like there's so much to absorb, so much to like metabolize in your work. Like Ivan Loginov, oh man, I don't want to talk about his drawings. That guy like blows my mind. Like every time he puts out a new drawing, it's crazy. Um, Pam Aguilar is asking if I do any watercolor and any tips for that medium. Uh, I do a little bit. My tip for that medium would be just pick a shape and drop it in, and don't worry about it too much. Like it's a, I always try and think like imagine that I'm Sergeant with watercolor, and just kind of let go of the perfectionist urge. I think watercolor is something that it benefits from its fluidity. Yeah, and Sergeant I think exemplifies that. Jamie G is asking, so quick to question work on clients' part in graphic design, in my experience. Um, yeah, clients are always really really kind of demanding in design projects. Uh, let's see. Henrique is asking, someday you could do a simple guide on how you approach digital art. It would be helpful for people who try to do what you do, but in Photoshop, for example. Yeah, I've kind of thought about that back and forth. Like as Photoshop, of course, has become like more and more of a presence in my workflow, because like I use it for so many things. Like the eventually the book that'll come out is a book essentially of diagrams, right? That I've made like on Photoshop, and like kind of explaining visual ideas diagrammatically. I think that's like the big push that I wanted to make. Like if there's like, I guess if you're gonna make a book, like you better have like kind of a reason to make a book, right? Like I don't want to make a book just because it's like, oh, I could do a Kickstarter, and maybe it's nice to a nice little payday for a book or whatever. Like that's not like really a great reason. But I just think when I was studying, like there's so much that I think I could have derived from seeing the ideas explained instead of just hearing somebody explain them. And like that's the book that I wanted to write, or create, was a book where you were taking these concepts, which are essentially like really abstract to explain, um, and bringing them into this place, because like we're all obviously very visual learners, taking them into this place that makes them a lot easier for us to grasp, because they're a part of like a visual expression rather than something verbal. Anyway, I'm a big believer in diagrams. So that's kind of what was that? I don't remember the question I was answering. Um, oh yeah, like about Photoshop. Yeah, yeah, and like I said, like I kind of use Procreate and Photoshop for that. So that's where that kind of ties together. Let's see. All right. Valerie is asking, hi, Stephen. How does the image rights work if we post our images on social media done from your image pack? Yes. So cool question. With the stuff that you get from my model packs, you can absolutely post it on social media. You can make artwork. You can sell that artwork. You can do whatever you've got to do with the work that you make from it. The only thing that I ask you is that because of the model's image rights and my contract with that model, I would just appreciate that you don't post the source images themselves on social media. Like if it's in the background of a studio shot, like that's cool, that's fine, whatever. But just please refrain from maybe posting the actual source images on social media. That's something that for instance, like because I have that contract, if I needed to do, I could do, but I would prefer, or actually you wouldn't technically have the right to do so, based on those image rights. So yeah, everything else aside from like putting out the photos of the model themselves is totally fine. Paul Aguilar is asking, what are the most common mistakes you see in beginning oil painters? Well, probably the biggest mistake, or the biggest like difficulty, is actually having learned to draw really well. And I know that sounds like I'm kind of answering something around the question. It's actually true. It is the biggest thing. If you have a good control over drawing, it's quite possible to learn very well how to paint. However, if drawing is still something that you struggle to control, oil painting is only going to be like a bigger struggle actually to control. So understanding drawing is, I think, the first level. And by that, let's be clear, I'm not talking about like even having a good technique in drawing. I mean like literally understanding like concepts, like how to draw shadow and light, how to take a two-dimensional surface and give it a three-dimensional appearance. These are things that make a huge impact on you when you're painting, because like when you're painting, there's so many more variables like flying around. Um, that if like you're, for instance, struggling with defining, like somebody was asking earlier, like, oh, I struggle a lot to like see shadow shapes and stuff. If you're going into oil painting and you struggle to see shadow shapes when you're drawing, like that problem is going to be probably twice as big a problem when you're painting. So just be aware of that. Like be aware that your foundation, your fundamentals are only doubly important when you're painting. Let's see. All right, more questions. By the way, everybody that's watching, so I don't want to like bum everybody out, but listen, if you are watching this, it's really cool. I appreciate you being here. If you could like this video, that costs you nothing and it really helps me kind of boost the live stream. So please give that a click if you can find it in your hearts to do so. How do you get your pencils? Rosalie Rizzo is asking, how do you get your pencils so sharp to a point? Check out my materials video, stephenbaumanartwork.com. Go to the Patreon tab, go to the materials videos, and you can see it there. Various Action is saying, please make a 10-minute video from this live stream. Okay. Maurice Art is saying, what do you think about Van Gogh or older Impressionist painters? Can you use it in a classical or academic painting? Hey man, the well of artists out there that you can draw inspiration from is deep. And obviously Van Gogh managed to tap into something that was really essential for people, So absolutely, like making pictures is not like genre specific, there are pictures from all different kind of walks of art that kind of capture our interest. And with that being said, like if it's Van Gogh or somebody else, for sure. Yeah, Matisse, Warhol, like any of these artists who maybe on the surface don't actually seem to have much to do with kind of representational drawing and painting, can still make like an incredible impact on you, I think, as an artist. So, of course, yeah. So I just need to get to this really dark value right here. I just want to get like a nice flat even value behind that eye, because eventually like I need to push back the value in that area, and that means I need a nice even tone back here. This is where I'm like using my 6B to like get into the paper. Trying to have a light hand while I'm doing it as well. Like if you do stuff like this and you get like that really heavy hand, like I find that inevitably I regret it, Rather take a little bit more time with a light hand than to do something maybe too rapidly with a heavy hand. It's not going to be the same result. Like if it was the same result, by the way, listen, I like to do stuff faster. If I can do something quicker and have it done, I have no qualms. But kind of getting to that zero black, it's yeah, it just wants it takes the time that it takes, and you got to roll with that. Let's see. Brett Colonel is asking, any thoughts where you would like to be with your artistic career 10 or 15 years down the road? Brett, don't freak me out. I don't know, Like I was thinking about this the other day, because I started doing Patreon maybe like 3 years ago, and I'd love it. I mean, it's honestly, it's one of the best choices I made, was just kind of starting that out, because, you got to start at some point. It's like a massive learning curve, and like I've been lucky enough to work with like other artists and other companies and learn a lot from working with them. And so I've had a lot of opportunities, that have kind of taken me to a place where I'm really kind of comfortable in the job that I do, not least of which is like teaching at an academy for like 12 years. But Um, then you kind of think about like, okay, well, I'm 40 and I've been doing this for a few years. Like, am I going to be doing this in a few years? Or is there some other version of this? Like what's the, and I'm always thinking, I mean, it's not a great idea to imagine that everything will just stay perpetually the same, right? Like, maybe countries start, taxing online subscription services more because of XYZ reasons, or maybe Google buys Patreon and they up the rates, that they charge creators. Like any number of different things can happen and totally change the landscape. So like thinking I'm just going to do this forever is not realistic. Um, I'll be doing it for the foreseeable future. But after that, like it's kind of a toss up. I'm not sure. Like, I recently made the choice, and this is like a choice a long time in the coming, right? Um, there's a tension between like artists like selling their own work themselves and going through the kind of gallery system. And you know, I've kind of recently made the choice. I mean, I'll probably show with a gallery here or there, but I kind of think I'm just gonna do it myself from now on. And so, like, that means I'm gonna start committing my energy to like how to get that out there in the world. And so, does that change a little bit the trajectory of my life? Do I actually become a little bit more of a full time artist? I just don't know, Brett. I wish I had an answer. And I'm using this live stream to like just think about the different versions of it. I just don't know, but it's a great thing to speculate on, and I recommend to everybody out there like keep asking that question. You might not get an answer to it, but you might get an interesting idea from it. Let's see. Marianne, wait a minute, I lost the question. It's like scrolled super fast by. Hang on, I'm searching for the question. Marianne says, where can you buy some casts? Are they too expensive? You can get casts from Tor Larson, who has an account on IG called Tor's Cast Collection. I link to it all the time. It's where I get my plaster casts. So, and it's really affordable actually. By the way, also you should know that like the cast collection that I have, I will be converting into 3D online assets. You can already go to stephenbaumanartwork.com and find one cast. The one that we used in Drawing Essentials Part 3 is already a 3D asset that is available to Patreon subscribers there. So yeah, if it really is like a cost thing, I'm making workable versions of that available online, like with your subscription. Let's see. Guillermo Kebalani says, "Hi Stephen, recommendations for human anatomy books." Oh man, just get them all. There's that great book that came out as a Kickstarter called Anatomy for Sculptors, which is really diagrammatic in the way that they present things, and because of that, I think like really highly understandable. So that's the one I'll go with for today's recommendation. Anatomy for Sculptors. Just Google that, and you should come across. I forget the name of the company that did it, but did a great job with that. I used it as a lot of times as text for my anatomy class and for my crochet class. Let's see. Funut is asking, do you think for you personally music has helped or hindered you? Oh, like learning or like listening to it while drawing? Depends upon the day. If I'm really annoyed and can't figure something out, I have to turn the music off. Jamie G says, oh yeah, sorry, no, that's not a question. Esperanzo Gaffo says, how you sort the hairline on the top of the head. You live in light value, or will you darken it to define the separation of hair and skin? I think you're talking about like this area here. Eventually, like I'll be kind of darkening this down. It's actually just a little bit of an awkward angle to do it on a live stream, so I've kind of been drawing more like in this area. Actually, like down here on the drawing, there's actually a hand at the other end of the composition that will also be a part of the drawing. But I can't really get to that on screen today. So that'll be a part of the Patreon release eventually, but probably not a part of a live stream, just because vertical format is a really difficult thing to bring to a live stream in any detail, um, because of like the overall like format that you watch things in, right? Yeah. Let's see. Ricardo Este is asking, what do you think of a sketching style like Carl Kopinski's? I think he's really cool. I think he's really good. Sunbit Dust. Yeah, thanks, Sunbit. Reese Osborne says, "Hi, Stephen. Hope you are leaving or loving Norway. Hope you're leaving. Hope you're loving Norway. Any future plans for workshops there? And will the atelier be on Patreon higher level? The atelier tier, Reese, will actually be on the $10 level. So for all of you that are already subscribed to Patreon at the $10 level, the atelier tier is what you will be getting. In addition to access to all the other videos that are already there, those aren't going anywhere. But the atelier tier is going to be there. The reason for this is that I really only wanted the atelier tier to be like able to get feedback or group feedback as something that's available for as many people as possible. So putting it at a higher tier eventually like it didn't it didn't do that. I decided to just do it at that tier, and released other kinds of projects intermittently, but like my main focus for at least a little while is going to be on developing the atelier tier content. Once that's available, like once I have like, for instance, like 12 months of atelier tier content available, maybe then I shift focus also to making some of the other tutorials I want to make. But for now, that's the plan. As far as like in-person workshops, let's wait till we figure out the pandemic, and then maybe I'll think about that. But not for the foreseeable future. Funat is asking, what are your thoughts on the golden ratio? All these seem to be pretty exciting and driven by confirmation bias for me. Yeah, it is something that kind of splits opinions. There's people out there that say it's kind of like a myth. There's people out there that like swear by it. Um, it's kind of like whatever gets you through the night, like whatever gets your composition sorted, I think I'm kind of fine with. If you're a golden ratio truther, and you kind of feel like it doesn't really do anything, that's fine. If you swear by it, that's cool too. Um, like with anything, it does depend a little bit on its application. Anyway, it's an idea that's out there. I guess I don't really have anything like any decisive opinion about it. I just recognize that it is split, and that it does like kind of split opinion, and I don't really have anything to say about it. Um, Katrina Naran is asking, do you think it's possible to get into more traditional fine art gallery work without a formal education? Yeah, totally. Yeah, why not? Like there's plenty of artists that have done that. Um, galleries. Here's let's kind of break this down just for a hot second here, because galleries are not necessarily artistic institutions, right? Galleries are they work in sales. They are like a sales industry, and if you have an established market for your work, why would a gallery not want to work with you? Um, the same is true on the other side too. Like if you don't have any following, if you don't have any established record of sales, like why would a gallery want to work with you? Because they're there to sell artwork. Um, which is, I think, the crisis currently, which is, well, if you're an artist who, like myself, you have like an online presence, and you have an audience who's like there for your work, of course galleries are going to want to work with you. The question is, are you really going to want to work with galleries just because their commission fees are like so high? Like if you feel like you could do it yourself, would you just do it yourself? Yeah, I mean, probably you would, you know. I think like the reason that you want to be with a gallery is so that they take care of selling your work. But I can tell you firsthand that that's not always true. You can send work to a gallery and not sell it. You can be in a great gallery and it's not enough to really live from. I mean, these are the realities, you know. You got to find a professional model that kind of fits you and hopefully a gallery that fits you. Hey, listen, I mean, it's great to be with a gallery when everything's working great. Um, but you know, for me, like maybe I'm a bit of a control freak. Like I like to be the one responsible for whether things are going great or not going great, and not relying on, you know, whether somebody on the other end is giving maximum effort to my work or not. Let's see. Wow, yeah. Sorry. It's been a long stream. How long have we been on this stream? Like I feel like this is we're like entering 2 hour territory or something, isn't it? Yeah, we're like an hour and 40. I'm probably gonna have to call it quits because I'm like thirsty and hungry and all that. But let's see. Renee Hunt is saying, "What is your opinion on paying a costly participation for a 1 year gallery collaboration? Do not do it. Do not ever do it. I don't believe in gallery co-ops. I don't believe in galleries that charge you to show. You know, take that money, invest it in, you know, some video editing software, build your own online audience, and once again, do not go to pay to play galleries. I mean, if anybody out there has a great story about paying to show at a gallery and it working out fantastically, please send it my way. I'll happily change my opinion about this. But to me, nothing about that equation makes a whole lot of sense. So that's just my very rigid opinion about it. Funna is saying, how on earth do you do the light halftones so even I can't hold the pencil to get such tones? Yeah, it's a lot of practice. Chris N is saying, do you usually do the eyelashes as just negative space as part of the lay-in and then later go back and fill it in? No, I usually do it just as negative space kind of in general. I think that, I mean, if it's like it is over here, like in a dark background, I'll usually do them as kind of being a little bit lighter against that background, or if they're on a light background, I'll do them as kind of dark. But in general, like I just kind of it depends a little bit on what it's very situational, I guess, is the answer to that I have to give. There's not really one way that I do them. I just kind of respond to the value that I see at the time, or what the drawing is kind of calling for at the time. Yeah. Let's see. We're getting into the last of the questions that I'm going to be able to answer because I am exhausted after talking for 2 hours. But Christopher Macy says, I was wondering if you think that only better artists can actually see how good art is. I've had my family contemplate my work and in the same breath admire someone else's terrible art, and it's demotivating. Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like there is certainly like a shared aesthetic language in artwork, and you know what you're coming up against is the reality that the general public may or may not actually share your aesthetic vision, and it's up to you to figure out like how much of that matters. You know, like, do you need to be a professional artist? Do you need to make a living from your work? If you do, I think that you probably have to figure out a way to satisfy your own artistic, you know, desires and your own vision, but also you need to like be able to get other people on board, you know. It's a kind of visual communication, and if your work, and by the way, not everybody's work, that the work that they're drawn to is going to be something that people are gonna like, and like, you know, you gotta be able to be okay with that if that's a necessity to you. If it's more necessary for you to make a living, then you gotta start asking the question, well, how do I execute my vision and also make great artwork? Well, you know, I mean, it's low hanging fruit, but Michelangelo did it. Like the Sistine ceiling was a commission. Da Vinci's work was, many of them were commissions, and we don't look at those and go like, I mean, even Sargent, like a lot of his greatest portraits are portrait commissions, and we go like, wow, he was able to make something so stunning that people who don't even care anything about the people who it's of, hundreds of years in the future, are going like are still impressed by them. So he was able to kind of satisfy both of those criteria. And so that's the place that I try to be is I try to understand like, you know, how is what I like about this universal somehow? Like how can I let other people in on what I see and what I appreciate in something, you know? And that's such it's a very demanding task, you know. It's demanding of you to kind of communicate those things, to show those things. You know, like I love this sense of texture, you know, but I need to put that into the right kind of value so that it elevates actually the central focal point of the drawing. If I don't do that, if it's too much about the texture, then I kind of diminish what the portrait is really about, you know. So there's a lot of like things about balance and harmony and communication you got to think of when you're going to be an artist. Like I said, if that's going to be a priority to you to like actually reach out to the public. The good news is that, you know, we're all pretty average people. So like it stands to reason that if you like something, probably there's another segment of society out there as well that likes it. So like kind of going with your gut is I think a really good thing, you know. It's what kind of keeps you grounded, keeps you appreciating the work that you're doing. And so don't go against yourself. And I think people do this all the time. It's number one thing I can't stand with artists is they pretend it's like either or, but more often it's both. It's like I can either please myself or I can please the public. This is a straw man argument. You can make work that satisfies you artistically and also captures the public's imagination. It's totally possible. Artists have been doing it for millennia. The thing is, you just have to commit to that communication. Like, what is the version of what you're doing that people can understand? Meet them there. Help them kind of understand it. Or if it's more important to you that nobody understands it, that's fine too. But we can't pretend that in a way like it has to be one or the other. I think that's false. I'm getting really opinionated towards the end of this stream. Usually I'm really, really balanced. Um, did you go to an art academy and do you recommend it? I did and I do. Let's see. How did you make art your job? Through many years of trying to figure it out, most entrepreneurs, right? Like they go through several failures, like failed businesses. Someone who I will not tell you the name of, but he's a good friend of mine and a colleague, and has made a really great living for himself and his family online. His first business was an app that was made to locate taco restaurants in Southern California. That was his first business that he invested money and time in. And it didn't work out, the taco app. But eventually that entrepreneurial spirit brought him to a place that was the right kind of confluence in between what he loves and how to make a living from that. So that's the task eventually, and it's going to take a lot of times of messing up for that to come out right. Reese Osborne says, do you ever get bored and pause on your work or do other paintings and drawings? I usually end up doing many things at one time due to my tendency to want to work on something else. Yes and no. I mean, sure, like everybody, you know what? You're definitely not alone, Reese. Like we all have some element of that. There's also, though, like professional requirements. So I can't, due to like, basically, Patreon and things like that, I don't really have the opportunity to have many projects where I just let them sit for too long. They kind of have a little bit of like deadlines, I guess. But that's like the blessing and curse of having an art business that works, is that there's a demand on it to come out and to finish and to be ready. You know, when you don't have a functioning art business, you know, it's like you can kind of do anything. And when you know, I can remember many years where, you know, I just I probably didn't finish more pieces than I finished, and that's not even in the very distant past. Let's see. There's a lot of questions, folks. I think I've hit a critical mass, so I've got to roll on out of here. And listen, the rest of this eventually will be available on Patreon as an unguided draw along, along with the model pack and all the other stuff that comes with it. Don't forget, April 1st, Drawing Essentials 3.1, which is going to be the finish up of the cast drawing that we started in the previous month. Then also you're going to get that download to my John Singer Sargent master copy tutorial. So you're going to get that source image that I use. You're going to get the download, the materials list, all that stuff that's going to help you do your own master copy. That's on April 1st as well. So anybody out there on the fence, sign up before April 1st. And you're going to get a whole bunch of stuff in addition to all the other content. Thank you so much for watching and asking all these amazing questions. And if you appreciate this content, please just like and subscribe to the channel, and that will do a huge favor to me and incentivize more live streams. Take care, everybody. I'll see you next time.